Copperberg Conversations on Manufacturing Matters, where industry questions meet expert answers. Welcome to the Copperberg Conversation Table. Here, we'll dive into the latest insights on manufacturing. So settle in and let's get this conversation going. Hello and welcome to the third episode of Copperberg Conversations on Manufacturing Matters. I'm your host, Nina Roper-Yearwood. I am super excited about today's episode because we will be getting an inside look into the Power of 50 event format. It is an event format that connects top leaders in manufacturing in an exclusive and high-impact way. And with me today are two of the driving forces behind this format. We have Lisa Hellqvist and Malin Mostofi. Lisa Hellqvist is Copperberg's Managing Director. She has co-founded the company back in 2012, and she has over 15 years of experience in the events industry. She has led everything from large-scale conferences to more intimate settings like roundtables and seminars, both in person and virtually. She's based in Sweden, where Copperberg is headquartered, and lives just outside of Stockholm with her husband and toddler. And we also have today with us Malin Mostofi, Copperberg's marketing director. She has a 20-year career spanning marketing leadership roles across Asia and Europe. Malin has played a key role in shaping Copperberg's events strategy. She also resides in Sweden with her husband and two children. But rather than just telling you about their work, I'll let them introduce themselves and share their journey in creating and refining this exclusive format. Lisa, Malin, it's a pleasure to have you both with us.
Thank you, Nina, and it's always a pleasure to be back, and thank you for that nice introduction.
Yes, thank you, Nina. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Yeah, so like what I alluded to earlier, let's start by going on a time machine. I'd love to hear your personal journey. How did you get into the events industry? So just take us down memory lane, what your journey looked like, and how did you end up here at Copperberg?
Maybe I can start because I think I ended up in Copperberg before Malin. But our path, met later on. I graduated university. I hardly remember which year, but it was in the mid 2000s at some point. Started my first real job, after graduation as a CEO assistant in the construction industry, actually. But that was a temporary position. So, the time was coming to an end, and I was looking into working in international positions. Basically, that kind of triggered me a bit. I was very fond of marketing. I have a finance and economics background, actually, but somehow the marketing sort of trade felt very appealing, and I applied for a position as a marketing manager in a Stockholm-based, or the office was in Stockholm, but an international events organizer. That it was a multinational events organizer and one of the leading ones on the planet, I would say. So I ended up actually getting that position and was executing, I wouldn't say large-scale events to start, but mostly Swedish public sector events for the healthcare system predominantly here in Sweden. I did that for a few years until I was actually, one could say, headhunted through other relations over to a smaller Swedish provider of events that was at that time called Midfield Media. And Midfield Media was doing events that was everything from, I would say they were mainly doing Nordic or Swedish business technology events like business intelligence, IT security, hospital IT, and so forth. And I started there as the marketing director in 2009. That was also the mother organization of Copperberg. I started as marketing director, and quite quickly we started spanning out to pan-European events. We were picking up the service and aftermarket topic line. I guess we will come to that in later on as well, and how the actual birth of our now events came to the market. And we were growing quite quickly there. We did quite well. And things happened maybe a little bit like it is now, with the sort of natural knock-on effects after the Lehman Brothers crisis. So in 2009, we were feeling really the effects of that, and we span out to the aftermarket segment. And then in 2012, we had built up such an independent portfolio of events that focused on that specific segment. And that business model, because it was very much focused on, events are spanning over a few days, different logic and methodology, we realized we needed to fund basically, or found an independent company that could drive this portfolio itself. And that then became Copperberg, and I became the managing director in 2012. And not too, long after, we headhunted dear Malin from her position, or headhunted, but we also have some common, acquaintances, because it turns out that my first company in the conference industry and Malin's first company in the conference industry was actually the same, just different locations. So we were working for the same organization in different countries over quite a few years. But never met before that, never got to know each other, but we've had the same mentors, the same trainers, the same sort of marketing gurus, if one may. Some of them were actually really good that we were trained by. So we have a few, we share a few war stories from that organization. And I think that organization also shaped a lot of our commercial knowledge. So there's a lot of good things to be said. Also, the slight difference is, of course, that they do events about everything on the planet, basically, that one can do events about. So one really doesn't, maybe excel topic-wise within that specific, domain or area. But you really learn the craftsmanship of marketing and putting together events swiftly when you work for such an organization. So that's my journey. And I mean, I haven't moved since 2012. Copperberg has changed plenty, but I'm still here.
You are the institution, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm part of the furniture by now,
Yes. And Malin?
Yes. I mean, as you mentioned in your intro, I have been in this industry for almost 20 years now. Kind of when I graduated from university, I was at that point in working for a small publishing company whilst I was studying, and I kind of continued there a little bit. But that was a very, very small company. I wanted to kind of course, use my newfound marketing knowledge somewhere. And the events industry, I guess, seemed like a very good place to really get a broad spectrum of things. As a new grad, I didn't want to get stuck with just one area of marketing. I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to try everything and see kind of what I was good at. But it turns out the broad thing really suited me, so I kind of stuck around. The company that I joined then was the one that Lisa was also at. So she's writing, saying that it was a very good foundation for structure, for learning very quickly. It was kind of one of these event machines that you just kind of like, learned. You had to have a very, very strict structure in place for that to happen, and a good process. So it was a very good foundation for understanding this industry. Since then, I moved to a few other events companies, both in the UK and also later on in Singapore and Asia, where I worked for a few others. And then came back to motherland, Sweden, where I came across Copperberg. or midfield media, as it was kind of called at the time, or it was somewhere in between the switch, I guess. It was around 2013, so it was a little bit of both at the time. Me and Lisa had a launch, I believe.
Yes.
And I kind of felt straight away that this could be pretty cool, because I can use all my events knowledge from various larger companies to this, company where I guess anything is possible. I mean, it's a small yet structured event company where you have the possibility to try and test pretty much anything. So the combination of that, I think, was very attractive. And obviously, I've been around now. What is it, 11 years?
Yeah.
Also kind of getting part of the furniture, I suppose.
I think we can call you a bookshelf by now, Malin.
Right, exactly. Yes, but it is just that there is something with the event industry that, and I know other colleagues that have been in the event industries in other companies and really kind of enjoyed that aspect as well. There is something about it that makes people stick around. I think it's the highs and the lows of things. It's the hands-on and strategic all in one day. It's there is just something to that, and I don't know if it's rare in other companies or other industries because I haven't worked in many others, but in this, you really get to try and do anything. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I would
pretty
say.
cool indeed.
Mm.
And I see here that there is some serendipity and some fate at work here with the full circle moment for you and meeting Lisa, and unbeknownst to both of you working together and from a different company. So that's a really nice thing to unearth. So Lisa mentioned some hard moments back when she was working for Midfield Media and then to Copperberg. So obviously 2009, that's the financial crisis. We're way past that. But then another big thing that happened, and around this time, Copperberg is already well established, right? Was the pandemic. And that's when the world quite literally stood still. So can you talk about how you first realized that things just won't work anymore in the events industry as you knew it would?
Oh, I have this very kind of clear moment. We were executing in an event down in, I think it was Frankfurt, mid-February to 2020. Then I guess it must have been. It was the spare parts business platform. It was a great event, but we also had a lot of, it was a typical tourist, hotel in the city of Frankfurt. And there was these buses with people obviously coming from China, wearing face masks and taking temperatures in a line. And that was already before the sort of elevation, or it was declared a pandemic in Europe. This was just weeks before, so we were like getting a little bit okay. I remember the team got a little bit, how are we going to do events if this gets worse, because this was just the beginning of everything, right? We didn't know anything. And then I actually went on vacation to, I think it was Egypt, and I was traveling back what I believe was the 16th of March. I remember this. This is like, it's such a dedicated time and day that it was just like, okay. And when I land in Sweden, and I mean, Sweden has many good things, but it's also like very rarely do we have a public announcement by the Prime Minister or any of these kind of interventions from the government where they speak to the public. But when I landed, the airport of Arlanda here in Stockholm, the phone goes crazy, and I just see that we have now, Sweden has, said this is a pandemic, travel restrictions, we're closing down, it's all these distance. It's like, it was the first announcement, not closing everything, of course, but it was the first announcement that we have to go into this kind of mode, right, as a nation. So I just remember I had to walk into the office the next day and just say, okay, we have to cancel everything. we cannot travel. And we had a whole set of events lined up. And I believe that we were waiting. We were running an event not that long after in I think it was supposed to be in Cologne. And I think we had to cancel it on a Friday, and we were supposed to arrive on the Monday because the city of Cologne closed down. So it was just those kind of remarkable, quick and agile decisions that was really tough. First is all the money that goes into the event, the venues, the delegates, have they put their tickets, the speakers needs to be rearranged. We have to make sure that everyone gets this information so no one flies in there without knowing, and all of a sudden you become like a or maybe not functioning, but a high-paced travel agency, right? That just has to get a hold of everybody. And then at the same time, you have to make these decisions to reach out to the sponsors, the partners. What is the cost of actually not being able to go there now? What do we do with this? I remember we turned it into an online event with less than 48 hours to opening, which was, we managed, and all the speakers were there. The most part of the delegates were there, and I think most of the sponsors joined us for that because no one knew what to do, right? So it was also that, surprise element that I think just made people accept that. Then the pandemic itself was it was crazy. From having about maybe 80% of our annual turnover in physical events to moving it to solemnly, going into digital broadcast model. Thankfully, we had the infrastructure, like technology-wise, because 20% of our revenue were coming from digital activities, and it was steadily increasing. But we were a team of almost 30 people. The pandemic, of course, didn't justify that kind of back office. There's a lot of back office to events. Anyone who's tried to plan a wedding know that, or a bigger birthday party. It's one of the. It's a horrible, labor task in that sense. It's so many back and forth and detailed planning aspects. Not to mention the outreach you have to do to get all the delegates on board and all of that, right? So we went from an organization from about 30 to quite quickly we were down at around 10, I think, and then we ended up at 6 in the end, I believe, or 5 even. So it was a very, very harsh slowdown as well, and extremely tough. And you had to let go of members of the team that you enjoyed working with. And we also had our best year ever the year before the pandemic hit. So we were in an expansion phase, right? So all of this just hit at the wrong time. What is different from today, I would say then, that at that point, the financial situation in the overall market was quite stable. Before the pandemic hit, people were, having marketing budgets to spend and etc. So thankfully it happened at that sort of, a little bit where it was a positive vibe in the market, because people now just shifted gears and say, okay, but then we spend on things virtually. So companies like ours could actually survive. There was money still for us somewhere, right? Where we had to, when we had to stop our main product. Today, I think the market is seeing way more knock-on effects of recessions, for example, and marketing budgets are more cut than it was during the pandemic. So it would have been interesting to see what if we would have survived if it was today. But we survived back then, yes, in a different shape and form. But it definitely changed the mind and let's say the core of the organization in that sense. We went from being a very focused event organizer that also provided media and news to being a media platform that also does events. It's the other way around now.
So it turned on its head almost, like the script was flipped, essentially.
In one sense, it was great for our business model. There's nothing bad that doesn't come with something good, right? So it was great for our business model. We had to sort of structure ourselves to have a more long-term, approach around, the sort of publishing and the content creation and the media outlet and all of that. But it was definitely hard to juggle that at the same time, the downsizing, the change in strategy, the panic mode that many went into, and then balancing that with trying to, have a strategy for the new version of Copperberg.
And
Horrible
Malin,
times.
do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think Lisa has more the first-hand experience when it comes from the Copperberg point of view. I was on maternity leave at the time when it broke out, so I kind of left the company that had 30 plus people and came back to a company that had like 7. So of
Yeah.
course the change was crazy, and I understand there must have been a insane period really to kind of make those day-to-day decisions. So from my point of view, it's more of the aftermath. I think I rejoined after my leave somewhere the summer of 2020, and of course it was still in the middle of the pandemic. Things were still very uncertain, but obviously we had made a lot of big decisions already, moved into digital. As Lisa said, it was very lucky that we had already started that process, so we didn't have to start it from scratch. So from my point of view, it was more about dealing with what comes next. How do we reshape this company from a events organizer that occasionally does digital products to a media house or almost like a marketing supplier. And it was a big personal learning curve, of course, which, you know, at the time was a little bit scary, but it was, in hindsight, it was almost a little bit needed for us to reshape a bit and maybe rethink. And we're going to get into the format later, but rethink even the format of all of our products in our portfolio. Which ones are actually useful? What do people want? You know, we have to kind of start from scratch and almost realize that actually we know quite a lot about this industry, you know, when we started to create pieces of content, etc., etc. So it was a learning curve and like almost like a personal development in a sense for all of us that were there. And you know, also very lucky that we are in a agile company that we tested a lot of things. Some of the things didn't work, some of them did, and then we kind of moved from there, right? So so yeah, it was crazy, and now we have landed on the other side with a bit more confidence in what we can do. Not that we didn't have that before, but now we've had to reshape and we have I think a very good portfolio, and we also know that if anything happens, we can change it. Nothing is really set in stone.
No.
So it actually emphasized here something about creativity and really forcing everyone to adapt and restructure. So I was going to lead up to how the business changed during this time. And because coming from the other side, where we now see, of course, present time Copperberg has the Power of 50 event format. So for our listeners, that's an exclusive event capped to only 50 professionals, where they will join peer-to-peer discussions on roundtables. There will also be keynote speeches that they will be listening to and take part during the Q&A. And then there's a lot of networking during that very busy, buzzy day. So it's a really packed day of all of that. So that's what Power of 50 looks like. So I really just wanted to trace the steps to how you got there, coming out of this really, really challenging period, not just for the event industry, but personally as well, for us as people, as families. And yeah, just walk us through how we got there, how we got to this Power of 50 concept.
Yeah, I think it was basically during the pandemic. Of course, we got a lot of these, but we don't do virtual events. We only do physical events and in-person events, and these kind of objections from different kind of, you know, peoples in the ecosystem. And that's, you know, that's fair. It was just for a long period of time, there wasn't any other option than virtual events, right? But as we saw the kind of regulations around the pandemic kind of, you know, getting a little bit looser, it felt like, you know, we had gotten over the biggest bumps, and the sort of regulations started to be taken off on different countries, etc. we of course felt we were quite cautious, and we also saw that many in the first round, the first summer after the pandemic, where people didn't really see that the spread of the pandemic that much. People were a little bit overconfident and started launching events that they had closed down. So we felt that we couldn't afford in that situation, because we were so few. We couldn't wear such a large costume without knowing certainly that we would be able to deliver it, right? We had already spent a huge chunk of our time during the pandemic to make up for the services that we had sold to different people, but that we couldn't deliver in person anymore, that we now had to transfer. So we had a backlog of orders that we had to do something with, and we didn't want to end up in that situation again where we were backlogging because we had to cancel something. So the Power of 50 was, I would say, it was a hybrid of three things. One was obviously the idea of what makes Copperberg unique. So the idea, and what was also very clear to us during the virtual broadcast hype, is that we have great content and we can actually launch and broadcast that to plenty. We had a very loyal community base that watched the virtual broadcasts. What cannot be achieved online is that actual mind share. You can get close, but you will never get as close as the sort of experiential, just the element of being at a physical event and speak to people face to face. It's a different universe to do that. So Copperberg has always been known for its kind of, we've been dubbed the friendliest event in Europe, for example. So for our pricing event, so we have this community and this, I would say, structured networking features that we always have incorporated into our agenda, that just allows people in almost a predetermined format to meet as many people as possible on site. It's not, forced one-to-one meetings or anything like that. It's just we enabled this interaction through, large chunk of experience. We have arrived at this format, right, where we actually get people to meet everybody in the room and exchange ideas with everybody in the room. And that's a lot of FaceTime in one day. So we wanted to make sure we had that element of mindshare no matter what. So we started, testing around with different formats. Then we had this magical, at least in Sweden, that a group was defined by the number 50 during the pandemic. So, you couldn't have groups that were larger than 50, for example. So when we, eased into doing events again, we would say we'll keep it at 50, because that seems to be, a magic number according to the health authorities here. And we started, of course, doing events here in Sweden from the start. So we were like, okay, so it's a little bit more risk assessment. So worst case scenario in Sweden for locals, 50 will be a fine number. Then we should be able to deliver an event for 50 people in Sweden, right? So that's how we kind of arrived at the magic number of 50. But it also has to do with the math of the number of rounds and the number of people to make this algorithm work, where everybody meets everybody, right? So it's also a magic number in that sense. The algorithm gets messed up if we add people to the algorithm. And it's only so many hours in a day, so you can only do 5 rounds of roundtables. And then, of course, it was the fact that, the resources, basically. As we said, we were 5 people. So now we needed an event format that was easily, produced, that had enough delegates and FaceTime to make everyone who's there happy and satisfied, and give a chunk of experience to those who are there and bring value to them without exhausting our organization and, or over-promising, under-delivering. So we had to build a format where we felt comfortable on the delivery. The other aspect was also that we have to bake as much as possible into one day, because we still saw there that budgets and travel restrictions, mainly because of money, that we learned that, unfortunately, during the pandemic, that, non-necessary business travels got cut even after. So, we can't really have an event that really, forces the delegates to stay over several days, etc. It's not the same anymore. So we arrived in the Power of 50 basically based on these three items, but mainly it was, what is it that we can't replicate online and which size should that be? And that ended up being the Power of 50.
Yeah. I mean,
And Malin is very happy I didn't decide there was the 150.
Yeah, Power of 2000. That would have been a very different event. I mean, those are also possible.
Yeah.
A little bit more logistics involved. No, but I think you've covered all of it. I think the main emphasis that we got, obviously, as you said, Lisa, our community was craving meetups, yet our our society wasn't ready for meetups, so we had to do something that was in a combination of that. So we had to really think about, what can you do in a day, what can you do with a number of 50 people, because that's the current restriction in Sweden, and how can we make sure this day is of value. It should not just be a one-way knowledge sharing thing where somebody speaks to an audience, because that you can get online. It needs to be a two-way conversation and discussion based. And that's the kind of magical thing that happened, and that's worked really well. So,
we're keeping it.
We're keeping it, and again, as I said before, we've been testing a lot, and this was a test. We didn't know if it was going to work, but we knew we had confidence in that we could deliver it, and we had confidence in the number, and that we knew what we were doing. Whether the audience would receive it well or not, I mean, yes, of course, based on what we know, they would, but it really became a success for the audience as well. So that was very reassuring, of course.
It's almost like how diamonds are made, how Power of 50 came about, and how it's become. I think it's a unique space actually for people to really engage and have conversations, because more than keynote speeches, I think the heart and soul of Power of 50 are really the peer-to-peer discussions, which later on I want to show you some of the delegate feedback on the recent Power 50 event. That was the Field Service Forum. I picked out 2 representative feedbacks from our delegates. So the listeners will also be able to listen to this, because we will be playing Hans Göttlinger's feedback of the Field Service Forum. So he's from Sitecall. He's been with Copperberg Power of 50 events for a little bit. So he has some experience and has seen it evolve as well. So let's play that.
My name is Hans. I work for Sitecall, and I'm responsible for the DACH area at the company. I've been with the company for 6 years now, and at a number of Copperberg events myself before. Our topic was accelerators and blockers for shifting your field service organization left. So basically increasing the productivity of your service organization without increasing the staff enormously. So this was our topic, and we wanted to understand, and we did understand from our customers, what's driving them, what's driving change, but also what's standing in their way. Extremely insightful. So it was a very trustful atmosphere, I would say. People really opening up, talking to each other, talking to us. And group therapy, I think, covers it pretty well. So everybody recognized their problems in other people. And it did help in coming to certain resolutions in solving these problems.
And the next one that we will be playing for you would be the first-time attendees' feedback of the Power of 50. This is by Mas Khan from Wiesmann Climate Solutions.
Hi, my name is Mas Khan. I'm Director of Global Field Services at Wiesmann Climate Solution. Today I had a chance to share insights about how we can maximize the productivity of our field service by going towards more proactive maintenance, and also have a chance to enhancing the customer satisfaction. My day today was brilliant. This is my first time, by the way, at the Copperberg conference. Got a chance to look at so many different perspectives from so many industries that you normally on a daily basis don't talk to. So all in all, talked to a lot of technology partners, talked to a lot of similar service organizations, and I think I'm taking a lot of things with me.
You also managed to listen to what they said. So hearing that, Do you feel like this reflects the experience you aim to create with each Power of 50?
I mean, absolutely. I think, was it Hans that mentioned group therapy? I think that was a pretty good word used to describe it. I mean, you kind of get in front of a lot of people, you realize that people have the same challenges, and you can work it out together, and you can hear how other people have worked it out. I mean, this is kind of the essence of a discussion-based forum, right? So this is really what we want to deliver for them, and to hear that we are succeeding in doing that is, of course, very reassuring. Mas also mentioned that, he got to meet a lot of people that he normally doesn't speak to. This is also one of the other important reasons why we do these platforms. Because, of course, you can go away with your colleagues to a resort somewhere and discuss your challenges, but you will not have anybody else's input. Here you get to meet a lot of other people who have various experiences and challenges, but maybe have handled them differently. So this is also an important point, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it is group therapy. I think you said it well there, Hans. And I think one very important thing is also, like, it's such a different format, but Hans being in quite a senior position in a leading solution provider as well, he goes into something else than a sales role in this exchange. Right now he has a topic he wants to discuss with delegates, and they, as he said, openly share. He gets a lot of learnings because he now understands what his potential customers or other service leaders out there are facing as their day-to-day challenges, something that he would probably never get if it was just a sales conversation, right? Because then the guard is a little bit up. It's a slightly different dynamic, but the format actually sort of enables that mind share, no matter who you are in the ecosystem. Even competitors are openly sharing with each other in our format. So I think that's the beauty of it. And you also decide how much do you want to share. Of course, you're not going to distill, all the beans, maybe that is, confidential, but you can definitely share based on your own experience. And I think that is or just sit back and listen if you don't feel comfortable. That's the beauty of the format.
I have a question about this. How much does Copperberg actively take part in shaping the topics to be discussed? So kind of balancing what the partners want to talk about and finding that sweet spot as well into what actually the delegates, what matters to them. So how do you create that?
This is in our old company, there's a process for this. The events machines company, they have what we call, delegate research and topic briefs and all of this. We have a similar model, of course, but it's more now aspects of what we do. It's not necessarily, defined meetings. So you can basically say that the person in charge of creating the agenda, which for the Power of 50s actually is myself at this point, right? I will base the agenda specifics and topics mainly just accumulating all my input that I get from the sort of day-to-day conversations with manufacturers, and then try to sort of boil that down into what is actually. There's some things that will be constant. They're always top of mind topics. So they should always be on the agenda. That could be things like in terms of technology integration, change management. Those are almost always, on there in one way, shape, or form. And then it's, of course, the aspects that I say, okay, this seems to be the buzzwords right now, and not buzzwords from the technology side of things, buzzwords in terms of the service leaders. If I hear, for example, I've heard sustainability so much that now I'm, doing my own event on it, or our own event on it. I call it mine. It's my pet project. But it's one of those things where, when we heard a thing enough times, it can stand on its own legs. So it's a lot of what they say in German, Fingerspitzgefühl, actually, and being able to take all that, conversations and hear what they're actually saying. and then do what we do, as content writers and marketeers. We actually have to package that into headlines that make sense and that is relevant to the audience. So there's a lot of steps to take to arrive here, but I have come to actually very much trust our own expertise on this, not get maybe so much inspiration from the outside, but rather actually dive into our own community and see what sparks questions, what sparks discussion. What am I discussing with, the numerous people that I sit in these kind of online environments on a sort of almost daily basis with. What do the people say to me when we're having the, after-work cocktails after an event? What are some of the main takeaways? You can also hear that if some topics are always popping up during an event, that's probably something you need to embrace and put on the agenda for next year, because they're definitely coming, right? Or they need their own, 15 minutes of fame, those topics, and actually be addressed. So, I mean, it's very important to have that mixture of constant pains and challenges and new ways and inspiration to look outside what we're currently doing and kind of the future. But we cannot only do the future because people don't have enough to say. So we still have to make sure that the discussions are very much sort of grounded in the day-to-day business. So that's kind of the balance that we do, or I do. And then, of course, it's very relevant to find then leaders and keynote speakers or brands that people associate with these, specific competences, right? So it's also very much the poster boys or girls of the event. If someone is going to stand on our stage and talk about, their predictive maintenance model and uptime contracts, and it's, a very, high valued brand and a very senior person, that's obviously going to help Malin reach out to the audience, because people want to see this. So, and we try to have as many new faces as possible on the stage to make sure there's a certain flow of new information as well, and not rely on all our loyal speakers. We have plenty, actually. That's also a luxury. I always have people to call, but I'm always trying to get that new flair into the agendas as well. But it's it's a weird answer, but it's a lot of gut feeling nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And then we rely on our expertise now. That's it.
I think you've probably mastered the basics already, that you can kind of wing it a little bit.
And, I have people working with me in the content development team, of course. And for them, there are structures and, there are buzzwords and there are certain, ways to get there. But, it's the organization of Copperberg knows enough now to be very sort of confident around the topics we produce. We're really specialized, right? So it's more about having the ability to listen to people and then digest what they are actually saying. What is it that they're actually saying? What is this topic? What they're saying right now, how does that translate into a to-the-point topic? That's more of the actual, and that's more of a content writing or journalistic trait. That you have to learn that craftsmanship to just take a very, very long explanation and make it into a headline.
And I would add as well what you asked earlier: how do we balance what the partner might want to talk about, and how do we set our topics? I mean, with also experience, we're pretty good at matching that partner with the topic or with the table. We would never have two tables on the same topic, for example. And the partners that have been with us for a while, they also then understand the benefits of having a discussion table as opposed to kind of maybe this is not a sales pitch moment. This is not a place where you're supposed to do a demo. This is where you can actually learn from your potential customers or your customers who might be sitting around you. So that we obviously, for the new partners, we inform them of this. for the ones that have been with us for a while, they completely understand this. So it's in their benefit to have something that people really want to talk about and discuss, and to sit and listen as opposed to moderate. That is the function of the role, as opposed to talk about how great your products are at that specific moment.
As we begin to wrap up, I want to ask you something. So, events, there's a unique energy in the on-site experience. So there's that the room is buzzing, that people are engaged. You constantly hear some hum of people talking, even if you can't make out what they're talking about. And I don't know, do you ever have that moment where you felt that everything just clicked, especially for the Power of 50? And that aha moment, and you stand or sit or wherever you are from that event room, and you think to yourself, this is what this is all about.
Oh,
Absolutely.
it's a great question. Yeah, but we have a lot of those, I would say. What do you say, Malin?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, we have them, but they kind of come in stages when you do on-site event, because you're always going to be prepared for something, anything happen along the day. So it's almost like you can't really have it 100% until you're kind of on the way back to the airport, heading back with all your conference gear. That's when it's like, okay, that was actually really, really well. But since we talked in the beginning, of course, both me and Lisa are from various events backgrounds. I'm guessing both of us have had experience with doing big exhibition style events to smaller events, and they are very different depending on what type of event you do. I mean, when you do exhibition, you kind of get an excitement when you start hearing the banging of the build-up, whereas with the Power of 50, you might have when everyone sits at the right place in the room, then you're like, okay, now we can start. Now everything is good. So yes, they're different, but it is a high, and it is something that you get at various stages, and especially when people start leaving the event, and people say thank you, and they show you their notebooks full of little scribbles and notes, and they're going to go back to the office, and they're all excited about all the actions they're going to do, and that is really the biggest highs, when people leave happy, and they are very, very pleased with the time that they've spent at your events. That's the real testament.
Yeah. And I can say it already starts at the registration or the cocktail the night before. There's so many faces that are well known to us. They are coming back. There are hugs, there are laughters. I hear Malin and Lena, who's often at the registration desk, just laughing away with delegates, and, wow. And I'm often, getting mic'd up to get on stage. But it's this moment, when you see familiar faces in the audience, but it's not all familiar, but it's this great mixture. And, when I open the event, you just see that they look happy at that. It's also like, there's a certain atmosphere already from the point that they get into the registration desk. It's very, it's very light and happy in that sense. We've already had normally a little warm up the night before. But then as soon as they are, turning around to their first round of roundtables, and that's where we really break the ice on them, right? It's where they go into their first round, and you hear it's always a little bit slower the first round, but now we have so many experienced delegates and partners that it goes way quicker, right? And then you just hear the room like zzz, and I almost can't get them to be quiet when it's time for the next speaker. I even dance sometimes just to grab their attention, right? Because they're just, talking away, and they couldn't ignore me more. And I'm up there on stage with the microphone, and they still don't hear me, right? So that's when you also get that, when you hear the laughter in the little groups there, and, they're making fun, and they are, intensely, discussing things. That's when you realize that, okay, this worked. And then, when you see also delegates are like, delegates are there alone. They don't have a travel buddy with them or a company friend, and you see that they are in different little groups at all times. They always have someone to talk to because the format allows you to get introduced to so many people that you're never alone. You always have, you're always partnered up with someone. So that's also nice, larger events that has a little bit more of a slow introduction. You always saw a few people that was like, standing in a corner and looked a little bit, you had to go help them and introduce them. This is way it falls into place in a way different form actually here. It just happens basically. Very experiential. You have to be there.
Yes, indeed. And this brings me to my last question, because we've all listened to the feedbacks together earlier, right? And I want to turn the tables a bit and anchor my final question based on that. In your view, what is the lasting power of the Power of 50?
I think it is, number one, I think it is you had to be there. So that makes it, the scarcity of the events, as we always use as a phrase internally. I mean, the fact that it gets fully booked, the fact that it's only once a year, you have to get yourself a seat at the table, basically. It is a unique experience in itself. And I think that impression lasts long for people. I have a lot of introductions coming my way, or like questions from people that is like, acquaintance to some, to my larger network, and they always refer to someone that they heard something about our events, or they met someone that had been to our events and recommended them to reach out, and etc. So there's a lot of word of mouth around the events, so they obviously leave an impression. But just as Malin was saying, just the fact that they take these notes, and I mean, it's like a massive workshop of just leaders that is a neutral ground as well. It's not your own peers or colleagues, it's everyone, right? So it's also very diverse. It is homogeneous enough to make sure that the discussions are relevant. If it's too diverse on seniority, etc., it might be hard to have a clear path in your discussions, right? So the group is, and the function of the people in the room is homogeneous enough to have common sense in the discussions, but it's also diverse enough to get new inputs. And I think that is the balance that is so hard to achieve unless you have this kind of structured networking format.
Absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. The format itself is a winner. I mean, it's small enough to be intimate. Everyone gets to meet everyone, but it's big enough for you to be able to have a varied amount of discussions in just one day at this specific topic at hand. So it's and the other thing I would mention when it comes to format, I mean, it's pretty easy to attend because all you have to do is to show up, and then we tell you where to be. And I would just think, as myself as a delegate, you talked before that people might show up and they don't really know what to go, and someone stands in the corner and don't know how to speak to anybody. We kind of dictate a little bit where you should be, where you should sit, and as a delegate, I would think that would be super nice.
Yeah, it's like a wedding. You have your seat.
Yeah, you don't have to think.
You don't mess with the seating arrangements.
Exactly. You show up, you get your badge, and then somebody tells you like, okay, here you're going to be here, and then you're going to be here. That would be like a dream day for me. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to do it for other people. I'll be like, I just want to show up and somebody tells me where to be. I think people do really appreciate that as well, that because it can be probably a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes to go into a room, you don't know anybody, and you don't know what you're going to be, how will I contribute to this, but then you sit down and you talk and everyone else is talking, and then you kind of get to share. So it's like a natural icebreaker, and you don't have to do anything, you just have to show up, and then you get a good set of notes out of it, hopefully by the end of the day. People really appreciate it, and that's why we will keep them going as long as people want them. That's kind of the lasting power, I guess. Mm-hmm. That doesn't say that we will not do anything else, but as long as people want these kind of formats, we will do these kind of formats. Again, we're an agile company. We will do what people want us to do.
Very much so. Well spoken.
And wow, thank you so much, Lisa and Malin, for sharing with us some great points on what makes the Power of 50 event format so special. So as we now know, it's really more than just the event. It's the people, the relationship, and the ideas that spring out of it.
Mhm.
Thank you once again, both of you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
Nina.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please like or follow us from wherever you're tuning in from. Got a topic you'd love us to cover next time? Or maybe you're itching to share your own insights as a guest? Drop us a line at podcast@copperberg.com. We'd love to hear from you. This is Copperberg Conversations on Manufacturing Matters. Until next time.